Well, the Switch 2 is finally here, and I got one. It has for me, as I imagine for most people, been a $500 Mario Kart machine. And while there will definitely be other games to play on the system within the next few months, the question still remains, is the most expensive kart racer ever even worth it? In fact, as I've been streaming the game over the past week or so, that has been a frequently asked question by chat. Do you like the game? Is it worth it? Is it worth $80? Etc, etc. And the answer to that is no. No game is worth $80, and Nintendo's price hiking practices are quite frankly kind of disgusting in this economy. Look, if you just want my review of the game, there is a timestamp below you can skip to, but it's impossible to separate Mario Kart World from the price situation surrounding it. And I can't in good faith recommend the game without acknowledging that it is exorbitantly expensive. It was revealed as the first $80 video game, and seems to be the harbinger of normalizing that price point, only a few years after they jumped from $60 to $70. I know the counter-arguments about inflation or talking about what video games cost in today's dollars 20 years ago, but ultimately I think those miss the point. Converting the money of the 90s to the money of today doesn't really acknowledge how much more expensive the cost of living is. With an absurd number of people struggling to pay for basic needs like rent or food, charging $80 for a toy is a very high ask. Especially when to use that toy, you also need to spend $450 extra on a Nintendo Switch 2 console. The fact that Mario Kart is meant to be a multiplayer experience also means that by pricing some people out of the game, you are inherently making it a worse experience for those customers who do purchase one. Personally, I like playing Mario Kart with my friends and viewers. My Discord server has had a number of Mario Kart 8 game nights where we all race against each other. The fact that fewer people can afford Mario Kart World than 8 inherently means that those game nights are going to be less populated. In fact, I tried to do a multiplayer session with my viewers and nobody in chat had a copy of the game, so I abandoned that idea. But perhaps the most damning thing about Mario Kart World's price is that the $80 price tag is a little bit misleading. You see, Nintendo justifies this exorbitant cost because they claim to think that Mario Kart World is worth $80. They're doing a new pricing system based on how much they think specific games are worth, and Mario Kart 8 is at the high end of that, in 80. Or at least we can hope it's the high end. Who knows, maybe they'll charge triple digits for the next Smash Bros. But Mario Kart 8 is also part of the Switch's launch bundle. Instead of paying $450 for a copy of the Switch 2, you pay $500 for the Switch 2 and Mario Kart World. This is significant for two reasons. The first of which is Nintendo traditionally does not do bundles with significant discounts. Looking at the Switch 1's launch, it did not have any bundle associated with it. You had to pay $300 and then shell out an extra $60 for whatever games you wanted. And the Wii U's Premier Bundle gave you a $10 discount on Nintendo Land. Definitely not the system seller that Nintendo thinks Mario Kart World is. But the second issue is that Mario Kart World isn't just a system seller, it's the only exclusive game on the system right now. Sure, you can take advantage of backwards compatibility to play Switch 1 games, at least sometimes, because sometimes the Switch 2 introduces new bugs, as is the case with Pikmin 3. And the Switch 2 does also have the Bravely Default remake, but I hardly think a remake of a 3DS game is a system seller, or even really counts as an original Switch 2 title. The only other unique game that the Switch 2 has to offer is the shitty $10 Welcome Tour, which is marketed towards people with more money than sense. Probably the reason that you see every streamer playing it. No, I'm sorry, making a takedown video about how the game is totally a scam doesn't mean you didn't get scammed out of $10. You're just handing Nintendo their money, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if that was the entire reason they made the game cost money, so that people would make fun of it and purchase it and give them their money. But aside from those three, the only Switch 2 games are third-party titles that have been available on other systems for ages. Like shit, one of the things that keeps being advertised is the Cyberpunk game, Cyberpunk 2077. But if you wanted to play that on console, you could buy a PlayStation 5 for $450 and you wouldn't have to spend $80 on Cyberpunk. It's only $60 on Sony consoles. Plus, it probably runs better than it does on Switch 2. Although I wouldn't know because I'm not paying for fucking Cyberpunk 2077. But with all of that in mind, it seems a little bit odd that Nintendo would bundle Mario Kart World with the Switch 2 for only a $50 bump up. After all, anyone who's buying the Switch 2 is almost certainly buying Mario Kart. You would think, given their history, they wouldn't offer a bundle, at least not yet. You could argue that the bundle is them being charitable, but I mean, the rest of Nintendo's behavior doesn't lead me to believe that they are being charitable. Instead, I feel like a far more likely explanation is that Nintendo does not think Mario Kart World is worth $80. They're selling it as a $50 game, and $50 is a much more reasonable price to ask for a kart racer. But now the game has a $30 fee tacked onto it for anyone who isn't an absolute Nintendo loyalist that buys all their products at launch like a good consumer. To me, it shows that Nintendo isn't charging $80 for Mario Kart World because they think that's what the game is worth, but because they know they can get away with it. They are the Disney of video games, by which I mean they get defended by sycophants who think they can do no wrong. I recognize that it's kind of rich for me to criticize Nintendo despite the fact that I gave in to their business policies and I purchased a Switch 2 myself, but I'll be honest, if I didn't feel like I needed a Switch 2 for my work as a YouTuber, I wouldn't have gotten one. I'm lucky enough to be in a financial position where I can afford that expense, in part because I can write it off on my taxes, but I think most people nowadays are not nearly as fortunate as I am. And I would argue that if you're in the financial position where you have to ask yourself whether or not it's worth it to buy a Switch 2, the answer is probably no, which really sucks, because I know a common response to the criticism is, well, you're just poor, but I don't know, I think poor people deserve to play video games too. I don't know, the whole situation's just really shitty, and I wish that anytime I talked about how much fun I'm having with Mario Kart World, I didn't have to give the caveat of the price is absurd and Nintendo is disgusting. But that's where we're at right now. Can't really separate the game from the price it's at. With that being said, even ignoring the price criticism, is the game actually even any good? My answer to that is a resounding kinda? Mario Kart World is probably the most uneven entry in the series, at least amongst the ones that I've played. The gimmick this time around is the entirety of the game takes place on Mario Kart Island, which is a huge open world containing the various courses that you race on. But in between the courses are stretches of highways, field, volcanoes, ocean, etc. that you can zoom between in intermissions while you travel from track to track. Additionally, even outside of races, you can roam around the free world and explore, and there's plenty for you to do on the island as well. In addition to just driving around and exploring this surprisingly populated environment, there are single-player missions you can go on, such as timed trials, hunts for blue coins, tutorializing shortcuts, or other surprisingly challenging missions. I know Mario Kart 7 gets a lot of praise for its story mode and single-player missions, and I haven't played that one, but if they're anything like the ones from World, I can understand why. These are incredibly fun and surprisingly difficult, and they give me something to do outside of just the races. Slightly less appealing to me are the hidden collectibles, the question mark panels and peach coins. There's not really an indication as to where they are until you see them on the minimap, and once you see them, they're pretty trivial to grab, except for in some cases where you need to do fancy tricks to grab the peach coins. They mostly just feel like time waster scavenger hunt collectibles. I guess the idea is to get you to drive around the open world and explore it, and to be fair, I think this open world has a lot going on. There's NPC drivers, food that you can use to get costumes, and even Nabbit or Charge and Chuck who you have to hunt down in order to unlock stickers. But I think the world is fun enough to explore on its own without needing to have these hidden collectibles forcing me to sweep through every nook and cranny looking for them. Instead, just driving around looking for the missions is enough motivation for me to see the majority of the island. Now, in theory, I could just ignore the question mark panels and peach coins since they're not really for me, but in practice, you need to get a good number of them in order to unlock mirror mode, which is something that I do want access to, which means I'm kind of obligated to go through the world's worst scavenger hunt. And mirror mode isn't the only unlockable with some annoyance tied onto it, as one of the big selling points of Mario Kart World is the extra characters and costumes. The costumes themselves are easy enough and, in my opinion, fun enough to unlock. One of the new items in this game is dash food. It's functionally identical to mushrooms, but instead of being in item blocks, it's in food bags that Yoshi slings around at designated locations. All of the food is functionally the same, but depending on what biome you're in, you will get different items. Peach's Castle gives cake, the ice cream zone gives ice cream, and you get meat in the dinosaur zone, etc, etc. The different food is tied to different costumes, so if you're a main character and you eat a piece of food, then you will transform into whatever costume is tied to that food. You can get this dash food either in the open world or during races, and as soon as you transform into the new costume, you will permanently unlock it. Also, if you don't want to change costumes, there is a setting to turn off dash food changing costumes. That way, once you've unlocked everything, if you want to race around with Vampire Waluigi, Bee Wario, or Ice Cream Cone Toadette, you don't have to worry about avoiding the dash food in order to not transform into a different costume. I think this method of unlocking costumes is pretty cool, and it got me to rotate throughout the roster during my time in the Grand Prix and relays so that I would get food on different people and unlock various costumes. Every reattempt that I did at a course or Grand Prix, I changed up what character I was using because maybe the new dash food will get me something really cool. And a lot of these costumes are really cute. I particularly like the baby characters. I usually find them obnoxious, but in this game, because they're playing dress up, I find it kind of adorable. There's also some funny costumes. Like I mentioned, Waluigi is a vampire, Wario is a bee, and there's even a monocle King Boo, who's the aristocrat. Ho ho ho! The costumes are unfortunately distributed a little bit unevenly. Stars like Mario, Peach, and Yoshi get a ton, whereas Shy Guy and Koopa get decidedly lesser. And standing out to me are the fact that both Donkey Kong and Pauline only get one costume each. Although personally, I suspect this is tied to the upcoming Donkey Kong Bonanza game, since Nintendo probably wants to promote the sales of that game, and releasing new costumes for this duo would be a great way to do so. But Pauline and Donkey Kong aren't the ones hurt most by costumes, because while every quote-unquote main character gets some costumes, there is a second categorization considered minions, or enemies, or weird characters, and they don't get any alternate outfits, which is pretty disappointing, because I feel like they could have at least gotten one each. Even if it was something as simple as a palette swap, giving you the blue sidestepper or the green Parabitty Buddy, it would be more than just nothing, which is kind of sad. But that's not the only sad thing about the minions, because the way that you unlock minion characters is a little bit obnoxious. Basically, your opponent has to use the Kamek item on you, which will transform you into a random minion, and if it's one you haven't unlocked, they get added to the roster. This means that functionally, some of the playable characters are unlocked through pure RNG. And adding to the annoyance, the Kamek item is actually pretty rare. I don't know the numbers, but experientially, I've only gotten it myself once, and the computer has launched it against me a couple dozen times, but that's nothing compared to the blue shells, red shells, bullet bills, gold shells, bombs, etc. I know some people are trying to do testing to figure out if different minions show up in different environments, but as far as I can tell, it is mostly random, with maybe some weighted chances for specific ones, but never a guarantee. I don't think I'm as bothered by this as some people are, but I understand if you're a completionist who wants the whole roster, or just really likes one of these specific minions. It's pretty annoying to have to roll the dice over and over, hoping that you get the right one. which is a shame because the inclusion of these minions is incredibly charming and adds to the cutesiness of this roster. It's incredibly unhinged to have characters like the Ostrich, the Moneybags, or the fucking Moo Moo Meadows cow be playable racers. From what I understand, they needed to model all of these characters anyway, so they decided why not just throw them in, and like, yeah, why not race as Parabitty Buddy or fucking Swoop Bat? When you combine this with, in my opinion, very good visuals and one of the best video game soundtracks I've ever heard, the presentation in this game is top-notch. But, of course, this too comes with its own set of caveats. Because despite how great the soundtrack is, there's no music room, and Nintendo hasn't added it to their bullshit online subscription service music platform. I know Nintendo not selling their soundtracks isn't anything new, but it is still a point of frustration, and at the very least some of their other games have fucking sound rooms. This feels like the sort of thing that could easily be addressed in a free update, but Nintendo being Nintendo, I'm not gonna hold my breath for it. If it sounds like I'm being incredibly negative, that's because I am. I think there's a lot of areas where Mario Kart World falls short, and perhaps the most frustrating to me is the way that Grand Prix are handled. You see, along with the open world came the idea of intermissions, those being the stretches of road in between the race courses, since they all take place on the same island. So, when looking through the course menu, in addition to racing on places like Peach Castle and Donkey Kong Spaceport, you could also race between them. And these intermissions function sort of like straightaways. It's typically more exciting than it sounds like. A few of the intermissions are literally just stretches of highway, but most of them feature a variety of obstacles and enemies for you to steer around, jump over, and even some shortcuts for you to take. And in fact, I often find myself intentionally choosing some of these straightaways during versus races where I can pick whatever course I want. However, I wouldn't play the game if it only contained intermissions, and I do really still like the main courses that Mario Kart World has to offer. It's just a shame that those main courses are almost entirely absent from Grand Prix. Because now the way that Grand Prix works is instead of racing through 4 separate courses, you race through the first course and then the next 3 races are all intermissions linking between each of the additional 3 courses. You do a single lap of each course once you reach it at the end of the intermission, but to me that's just not the same as doing a full 3 laps of Moo Moo Meadows. For some reason, in the lead up to Mario Kart World, I thought you could turn the intermissions off and just get a traditional Grand Prix, where you race on all 4 courses 3 laps apiece. But that isn't the case. If you want to race on the majority of these courses, you actually are only able to do it by selecting it in Versus mode. There's no Grand Prix that has all 3 laps of Dandelion Depths, Question Mark Ruins, Bowser's Castle, etc. I get that the reason they made Grand Prix work like this is they wanted to show off the open world, but it honestly doesn't feel like the open world. You still have a loading screen in between races, so it's not like you're doing an interconnected island gambit. You're just racing on 4 separate courses that happen to be right next to each other. In contrast, the newly added rally mode does actually take full advantage of the open world and is genuinely my favorite part of Mario Kart World. Rallies are incredibly long endurance races, stretching between 6 different points on the island. They bring you through multiple biomes in the same way that the intermissions do, but there's no loading screens or pausing in between them. And as such, the distance between you and the other drivers maintains the whole time. Of course, this could be bad if you fall too far behind and you might as well not finish the race, but that's why each checkpoint eliminates the bottom few people. First, it's the top 20, then the top 16, the top 12, the top 8, the top 4, and finally whoever is in first place wins it all. And these rallies are really cool, both with the thinning the herd and just a very long race, sometimes up to 10 minutes, that you have to stay focused the entire time through. But, of course, it comes with its own set of caveats. There are only 7 rallies, and you can't make your own. even though it would be very easy to do so by simply selecting 6 of the courses and saying that's where we're racing through. After all, there are intermission stretches between any of the courses adjacent to each other, even those that don't get used in any Grand Prix or rallies. It feels weird that these intermissions only get used if you select them in versus mode. And honestly, a make your own rally feature, which again could be added through a free update, would be huge in terms of replayability. Just select your 6 favorite environments, and as long as they're next to each other, you can go zooming through them in a very long race. Similar to including a traditional Grand Prix mode without intermissions, a create your own relay mode feels like the most obvious inclusion, which is why it's so weird to me that it isn't there. And that's one of the most frustrating things about Mario Kart World. There's so many glaringly absent features that it feels almost unfinished. Mario Kart 8 introduced 200cc mode, but for some reason, World doesn't have it. Mario Kart 8 let you customly turn on and off certain items, and that feature too is absent. A big focus of the open world is collectibles, but there's no checklist to tell you how many in each biome you have left. The character select screen is an absolute travesty, which is absurd since the previous game in the series had a much better way of picking characters with alternate costumes. And while Mario Kart 8 had several different types of battle mode, World has instead only included coin runners and balloon battle. But that's not even the worst part about Mario Kart World's battle mode. There are technically 8 courses, but there's really only 4 that are genuinely designed for battle. The other 4 of them are just the racetracks, but you're doing battle on them now. Didn't we learn our lesson in the original Mario Kart 8 when everyone hated that choice? But even the arenas that are designed specifically for battle mode don't feel fun to play in. They're just way too big, and it feels like even with 24 players, you're so spread out that it's difficult to find your targets during the 3-minute timer window. I spent a lot of my battle mode time just driving around looking for someone to fight. I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of battle mode, so this being a poorly implemented battle mode doesn't bother me personally, but on a product level, it just feels bad. It is a undeniable, significant downgrade from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's battle mode in multiple ways. But battle mode's not the only thing that feels like a downgrade. Cause let's talk about what they did to versus mode. I am unhappy with it. At first, I thought versus mode would be the solution to the majority of my woes. This is where I can race on tracks for 3 laps. This is where I can do multiplayer stuff. Heck, this is where online is going to be situated. But once again, the ugly lack of customization rears its head. You can no longer adjust how many laps are on a track, a feature that was also absent from 8, but given its presence in Double Dash and other earlier Mario Karts, it feels so frustrating that they still haven't brought it back. You also can't enable or disable specific items, and perhaps most jarringly, you can't change the number of racers. You see, one of the gimmicks of World is the ability to have 24 racers, an absurdly high number that works much better in the elimination relays than it does in the actual races. And some tracks really do not feel designed for this increased number of players. Anyone who's played Mario Kart can tell you that being stuck in the middle of the pack is kind of a death sentence. You just get stuck in a clusterfuck of items exploding you over and over again. And this is even worse when you dial the number of racers up to 24. The front and the back of the pack don't have to deal with it, but anyone in the middle absolutely does. Despite the fact that Koopa Cape is bigger than Baby Park, it feels much more chaotic just due to the larger number of racers slinging shells and bananas everywhere. So I really wish there were the option to turn things down to the traditional 12 or even the old school 8. This is extra weird because in the team versus mode that nobody uses, they added the option for 2, 3, or 4 teams, but for some reason they won't let you customize the number of racers. I don't know. Again, something that they should just add in a free update, but Nintendo never will because Nintendo. And speaking of Nintendo being Nintendo, I think the most frustrating implementation in Versus is course selection. You have 3 options for this. open, connected, or random. And open, I think, actually works quite well. You select which course you want to start from, and you can either choose to go 3 laps in that course like normal, or you can choose to go on one of the intermissions and connect it to an endpoint. Unlike the character selection menu, this one is very simple because it uses a simple menu submenu system. My frustration comes from the connected and random choices. In connected, you start out in whatever course you want, and then after completing it, you must choose which of the 3 possible intermissions you go on, leading to another course that you don't get to do more than 1 lap on because you need to choose another intermission, and another intermission, until you're done. Functionally, it has the same problem as Grand Prix. After the first race, you're only able to do intermissions. Again, I like some of the intermissions. I think most of them are quite good, even if a few are pretty bland, but I don't want to only be able to do intermissions. But sure, that's kind of what the option is for, so I guess I can just select open or random, right? Well, random is not actually fully random, as you might expect. It doesn't pick between every single possible course. Instead, it starts you somewhere, either in a full lap, or more often in an intermission, simply because there's way more intermissions than there are full courses. And then once you complete either the course or the intermission, congratulations, you are in connected mode, except for you don't get to choose which of the intermissions you go on. It randomly chooses between the 3 options it gives you. So yeah, random mode also has the same problem the Grand Prix do. Once you finish the first course, you get all intermissions. Except for sometimes, even the first course is an intermission. But I hope you like only racing in intermissions, because if you do any sort of online racing, congratulations, it's forced to be connected mode. You can't even do a regular versus mode where you choose your own courses. You're stuck in Intermission City, baby! What the fuck? Like, why? The online lobbies are also apparently pretty jank. I haven't played one myself, so I can't attest to that, but it sounds like a classic Nintendo netcode moment. God, bad netcode, lack of customization, and hidden information are like the Nintendo Holy Trinity. Oh yeah, there's hidden information in this game. You can't see the mini turbo stat, which, similar to Mario Kart 8, is incredibly important and obscured for no reason. But also, according to my chat, there are a couple of other hidden stats, such as the speed and acceleration being adjusted based on environment. Certain karts and characters are better in the water, certain karts and characters are better in the mud, etc. I haven't gotten any confirmation of this, but this does feel like the sort of thing Nintendo would do, and I don't know, I just wish they would fucking communicate that stuff. I also kind of wish that you could reassign weight classes. Like Crash Team Racing, which came out almost a decade ago, let you use the funky characters functionally as skins, and then choose for yourself whether you were a light, heavy, or medium racer. Maybe it's just sour grapes for me because I like Wario the best, but I personally prefer medium characters over heavy ones, but I really wish Mario Kart would do that as well. Especially with the focus on goofy goobers, I want people to be able to play as the characters that they find most appealing. With all of this belly aching, you might think that I don't like Mario Kart World, but I honestly do. This is some of the most fun I've had with a Mario Kart in a while. So I do want to round out by highlighting the things that I enjoy, even if I think that there are significant shortcomings with the game overall. I already mentioned how much I love the single-player missions, the knockout relays, the charming cast, and the beautiful aesthetics, including the stunning soundtrack. But I also think the collection of courses itself is kind of freaking phenomenal. It caps off with probably my favorite iteration of Rainbow Road, but there's a ton of other highlights, including things like DK Spaceport, which is a tribute to the old-school Donkey Kong arcades, Acorn Heights, which is a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids style obstacle course, Boo Cinema, which has a really cool transition into a black and white movie, and of course a collection of retro tracks which are also very fun, including some that have been drastically reimagined. Dino Park, for example, is virtually unrecognizable, to the point that I actually forgot it was a retro track until chat reminded me. I also find the driving itself to be really fun. Between chaining things like grinds and wall rides together, to the air tricks you can do, there's a very high skill ceiling, and I definitely haven't approached it, but even a casual like me can enjoy these combinations and mechanics, to the extent that I really don't miss anti-gravity. If anything, the new wall riding and rail grinding sort of highlights how inconsequential the anti-gravity in Mario Kart 8 was. Similarly, while others have bemoaned the lack of kart customization, I always felt like that was kind of a pointless gimmick, and I'm pretty happy that they've brought things back to basics. I even think the airplane wings and water skis look better than the underwater anti-gravity and weird gliders that you attach to your karts did. But that's very much a personal preference thing, and I understand people who like the Mario Kart 8 style better as well. I also like the majority of the new items. The Kamek Orb doesn't just unlock minions, it creates chaos on the track by summoning things like chomps and pokies. The dash food is just a reskinned mushroom, but since it's in fixed locations, it can make navigating specific tracks and intermissions more strategic than otherwise it would be, since the other items are random. And things like the feather from battle mode or the hammers and coin blocks, which I think are from the mobile gacha garbage game, feel right at home in this chaotic kart racer. But for as much fun as I'm having with Mario Kart World, I feel like I can't recommend it, and not just because of the price. It feels like everything I enjoy has some number of asterisks attached to it. I love the tracks, I wish Grand Prix didn't suck. I love the characters. I wish the minions got costumes and were easier to unlock. I love these single-player missions. Why isn't there a checklist for what P-switches I need to find? I love the relays, but I wish you could make your own. I hate feeling this way. The reality is, I was never going to say that Mario Kart 8 is worth the $80 price tag, but the very least Nintendo could have done is made a product that feels worth the $50 I spent on it. Because as it currently stands, unless they do any sort of free updates, Mario Kart World doesn't feel worth the bundle price. Before we end, I do want to give a shout out to my patrons. Usually they get videos a week ahead of time, but since Mario Kart World was topical, I wanted to get this one out faster. Nonetheless, thank you Electric Giga, Erica Ford, YLO1, George Grenville the 7th PM, Jamie Collins, Arvis, Crispy Matthews, Floahay, I Like Rattata, Henry Finn, Faulty Videos, Lyra, Kyle Madison, Derek Williams, Just Riley, Anna Cabana, Some Trades, The Daily Fugle, Faye, Magic Bite, Sardonic Muse, Dysike, Chris, Root Beer Pants, Queen Elizam, Aerith Emblem, Controlled Ages, Roman Chromantic, Nick Knack Hammersmack, Mike, Bosnian Dave, SUP, Caius Cole, Histiclop, Prix, Punchfighter Champion, Eggman, Maxine the Vampire Queen, Dragon Pack Lancer, Carrier Has Left, Jill, Calamity Callie, Anonym Wander, A Clever Username of Lies, Jackson Kmahin, Saren Gurlixy, Tailored Muffin, Andu, Len, Gameboo, Carosa, Fyrant, Your Doctor, Girl Boss, Lizard Bongwater, Christopher Bueno, Marin McLean, Jaden, Reflect, Alan Provaste, Guigi555, Smaz Ruby, Zycrom, Robin D, Alenby, Hound Dogs, They Thumb, and especially my Jakins, Thick Molder, Adele, Alexander Roper, Siggy, Hypefish, and FM Towns. If you want to support my work and justify my purchase of a $500 Mario Kart machine, then there is a link to my Patreon below, but please only donate if you can comfortably afford to do so. As I said at the start of the video, the economy's kinda shit right now, so I don't want anyone to forego food and rent just for funny YouTube lady. The subscribe button is free after all, so if you really want to help me, that's probably the cheapest way. But regardless of what you choose to do, I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe, gamers.